All right, we are back with another episode of Content is for Closers. Here with you as always, Adam Vasquez, my co-host Carlton Riffle. Actually, I shouldn't say as always. I think was it
Yeah,
last week that
I guess this one will be 2 weeks. 2 weeks
2
ago,
weeks.
or
All
no?
right.
Yeah,
So you
I've lost track.
how was that? How did you feel going rogue? Obviously in the episode you claimed to have fired me. I showed up anyway for work, so hopefully that's not the case, but yeah, how did it go when I was gone?
I'm pretty good. It's gonna take some practice if I do that again. Um, it's I'm not great talking. It's just one of my weaknesses that when I talk, I just have a lot of filler words and use all sorts of
Yeah, this
you
is a
knows
bit.
and buts
This
and
is
ands. But
this is a bit that you continually come back to, which I respect. It's a recurring bit. Oh, I'm terrible at talking, but that episode is evidence otherwise. Obviously, Luke did a great job as well. But yeah, I thought you guys did a great job. I enjoyed that episode. If you haven't
thank you.
heard it, Luke Cleland joined the show and kind of gave very practical tips on photo and content creation. And I think what I really appreciated from it is Luke's experience all comes from sort of a different sector that he applied to content. He's just an actual photographer. He has his own wedding photography business, but brought a lot of those tips to marketing and content. And similarly, today's guest has a very unique skill set across a few different verticals that he has brought to bear when it comes to content and marketing as well. What did you think of the conversation with Barrett O'Neill?
Yeah, it was good because he's a fellow bootstrapper. He started his business, uh, not too long ago, but he had to build it from nothing. He didn't go out and seek investment. He just decided one day he's going to quit his job and start a storage company. And so he learns a lot of different things, and now he's applying that to a new media company that he's launched and running now. And I think with a lot of people that bootstrap it and figure it out the hard way, quote unquote, it gives you a much better appreciation for some of the subtleties in how you make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think he brings a great perspective and gives some like really critical advice for people that may be in the same scenario, and now starting with that 2020 hindsight can help people uh, run their business better.
Yeah, he's this super interesting character, right? Because he's got this, prototypical kind of blue chip background. He worked at Bain, which is shout out Mitt Romney, like the top of the top when it comes to finance and consulting. And he goes from that to starting a storage company for college students, or I guess he had done it sort of intertwined, but he goes to doing that full time, which is the opposite of Bain, right? It's very
Yeah.
manual. It's very just get it done. There's not a ton of strategic thought that has to go into it. It's can you provide the space or not? And he's leveraged both of those skill sets into what he's doing today, which is help consulting and helping other businesses. But all of that aside, I think the most interesting thing for me as a content creator and as someone who is doing this and trying to help other people do it, he's built his Twitter following to like I think he's got like 50,000 or more followers. I probably should look.
Yeah, I think he
Uh
said he's at 75,000 now.
75. Okay. And he said he started doing that in January. I
Yeah,
mean, that
it's
is
incredible.
crazy growth over the course of call it 8 months.
And I do think it's interesting how a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's too late. That trend has already passed. Now there's all these people." But I
Hmm.
think I would have said that, even in November of last year, right? Like I would have
Hmm.
said, "Oh, yeah, Twitter is just too hard to grow an audience now. Maybe you can still do things, but you can't use the same playbook." And really, he did use a lot of the same playbook, but then he also gives tips for new things that you can do and a new way of looking at some of that.
Yeah, this is a common argument you and I have. I'll
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, let's do X. I saw it work somewhere." And you're like, "Yeah, I think that's played out." And normally you're right, and normally I can't
No.
execute.
No,
Yes, no, it is.
yeah, I have a strong desire to be original in most of my things, and I think that probably feeds in an unhealthy way towards
Well,
making me not be a trend follower.
but I would say for this specific use case, like when he talks about the importance of threads to
Yeah.
growth, and in my head, I was like, I thought threads died 6 months ago or 9 months.
Yeah.
Like, and obviously, there's something past that. So he, as you said, he kind of provides his whole playbook. It's a really interesting episode, and I think everyone will enjoy it. If you don't have anything else, let's get into it with Barrett O'Neill. All right, we're back with another episode here of Content is for Closers. We've got Barrett O'Neill joining us on the show. Barrett, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So we were talking offline, had some Boston memories. We were sharing back and forth. You're in the Boston area and have started a couple of companies there. You got the on-demand storage hat there. Tell us about that and your other business that you're running.
Yeah, so on-demand storage is pretty cool. It was actually founded in a dorm room at Babson College where we went, which is in Wellesley, a suburb of Boston. What we realized was that all the international students that were there, they were going to Whole Foods in their Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Maseratis. And we said, okay, we got to figure out how to get a little bit of that money into our pocket. I think I got an internship at UBS, which for those who don't know is a bank. And I think it was like $14 or $15 an hour. So I just started doing some math, and I said, okay, I think that after tax leaves me at about $4,800 for the summer, and I'm like, that ain't gonna cut it. So what we did is we created a website, little brand. It was called Simple Storage at the time. We put a flyer under every door on campus. Stored about 67 students in my parents' basement, which we lived about 20 minutes from campus. I think we did like 22K in revenue. It was like 98% profit. It's probably the best business that's ever been run. But that was pretty much it. And then we realized there's just this opportunity in this changing storage industry where we could fill up real estate with, really, we focus on commercial customers, still a little bit of student business and some other stuff, but primarily commercial. And we just fill up space and we charge people monthly. And we've just found that at least where we are, space is really at a premium. So we're able to charge like 28, 29, even $30 per square foot. And like our cost is not even close to that. So it just creates really nice economics, but it's advantageous for our customer because they don't have to go and lease their own space and sign a long-term lease. So there's really an advantage to both sides. So we just kind of noticed that opportunity. It's not the sexiest business in the world, but it's fun and we've bootstrapped the whole thing. So it's been enjoyable.
So for clarity, you are renting out other people's empty commercial space?
So we have our own
storage?
Yeah, we have our own commercial space. And then what we'll do is we'll make we have deals with some recurring deals with manufacturing companies that need overflow space. We'll store that. And then we have a delivery network. We don't have our own trucks. We don't want to be in the trucking game, but we have a network of companies that will deliver and pick stuff up for us. And then we also will help companies, whether they're in transition, or a lot of companies are constantly shifting space, at least in the Metro Boston area. So they need this space. And for whatever reason, finding 3,000 to 5,000 square foot units to store stuff is extremely difficult. It's a very rare space to find in our area. So our theory was we could get bigger space and then we could lease out chunks of that to these companies. And then it's just kind of grown from there, and they pay monthly, and we make money by charging more per square foot, but the benefit to them is they don't need to go out and deal with like finding real estate and assigning somebody to that. So there's a really nice symbiosis there.
Yeah, that's a great business. I feel like there's a couple business stories I'm aware of like that. There's Nick Huber. He started with a similar-ish model. And then my buddies over at Bellhop started with almost the exact same model.
Yeah, those guys have done well. And we almost bought
storage.
Nick Huber's storage squad, student storage service.
Cool.
Yeah, we should compete against him and Dan as his partner, who is growing on Twitter as well. He's really both great guys, incredibly smart, successful entrepreneurs. So we know those guys pretty well. And I've heard, I don't know the Bellhop guys, but I've heard that they've done well.
Yeah, they shifted more to becoming a tech company after several years doing that part of it, and they've done well, at least in terms of raising money and stuff. So, quick question on the parent thing: like, what was their? Were they just cool with the basement getting overrun with storage stuff, or
somewhere in my Twitter meta thread there, I tell this story, but I think it was something along the lines of, "Hey, Mom, is it cool if I store a couple of my friends' stuff in the basement this summer? They don't live close to here." And then I shot Dad a call and I was like, "Hey, look, here's what's really going on." And my dad's an entrepreneur. So he was like, I love it. Just, it's cool. And my mom was like
That's
freaking
awesome.
out. She was cool with it. She loved it, but I guess she liked it more and I wasn't asking her for money all summer. So we felt rich at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, that's a great success story.
It was
So
awesome.
I've seen you talk a lot on Twitter about the idea of risk, the idea of jumping out with the net, and I think recently you were writing about the fact that you jumped out without necessarily the safety net of from your full time job, and you wouldn't recommend that to others. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So I'm 30 years old. So I've been a full time entrepreneur for about 6 full years, literally coming up this month. And at the time, I thought that was the way to do it. I've since learned a lot, and I also think a lot of tools and resources have come out in the last 6 years, in particular, about like slowly ramping up. I think the rise of freelancing and things like that are really attractive and very economically beneficial. And so I was working at Bain Capital, which is an investment company out of college, and it just wasn't for me in terms of being in the office all the time. So what I did was we came up with this idea for storage. We had done it in the past. We went and worked a year, and we kind of just jumped in and quit. At the time, we were doing primarily student storage. So if you think about how dumb this is, we quit our jobs in July, and our main customer was going to be student storage customers, who get out of school in May. So there wasn't like a ton of thought process that went into that. So that's one reason. But
Yeah.
I think the big thing is now, and what I've learned through my agency, Brightline Media, which I know we're going to get into, is I think starting with client work teaches you so much about entrepreneurship, getting customers, servicing customers, dealing with unhappy customers, getting referrals out of happy customers, all these things that are really important to growing your business. And you don't need to be doing it full time to even make a lot of money. I think most people could
Hmm.
replace or surpass their income while still employed. And I have this theory now, and I've totally 180'd on this, is that the best peace of mind is cash flow and a little bit of cash in the bank. It actually allows you to take a step back and say, do I really want to work with this person? Is this an ideal customer, or is this just a customer? And those things that don't really seem like big deals at the time, but if you deal with enough of just a customers and not ideal customers, over time you lead to a place where you're not happy, you're a slave to your business, all these different things. So that's why I think the next generation of entrepreneurship is really exciting because you almost don't have to choose. And I felt, at least I didn't know anything about client work. I actually learned about client work and agency work from being on Twitter. So I didn't know about any of this stuff. So I started an asset heavy business that was seasonal at the time. We're not seasonal any longer. In the opposite season, that would be appropriate,
Right.
with
In the off
no
season.
money. So you think of all these things and it's like, well, yeah, I made myself miserable for 3 years. That wasn't very smart. And then it was when I figured out my agency business that my personal life got a lot better. And I just look back and I'm like, I honestly I was taking 2 hour walks at lunch because I didn't want to be in the office. I could have been like in Boston Common cold calling people or something. And I would have done that
Yeah.
if I'd known about it. So that's really why I'm preaching that hard, because I actually, it was really, really hard for 2 years. Like, just, your self esteem is low. Like, you're making less money than all your friends, all these things. And so it's really hard. And I don't think you have to do that to yourself. Like it doesn't have to be hard. Um,
Yeah, it's a really good perspective because I think a lot. So I'm a similar timeline. I'm 32, but have been self-employed for about 5 years, and I think for me at the time, um, I had to do it that way. Like I had to just rip off the band-aid, partially because I knew I was I was working at an ad agency and then was gonna do some bit of services, so it was gonna be hard to like let those coexist. But the other side of it is I think a lot of people use some of that complex as reason to not go all in, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And I think, you can see both sides of it, but for certain personalities, I think quitting and having to figure it out. And I think your point is you can kind of begin that process of figuring it out even before you quit and not have to deal with, I mean, we definitely took on terrible clients and, and strapped ourselves to bad situations. So that, onboarding or on ramping through freelance or whatever it is can kind of help you avoid that to some extent.
well, I think you just brought up a really interesting point that I think is an important one to touch on, which is everybody's different. And so I was actually having this conversation on the phone with one of my friends who also, he has an anonymous Twitter account, but it's pretty big, like 70,000 followers. I told him, we were talking about this, and I said, oh, I wish I did it the other way. And he's like, well, knowing you, I think you're the kind of person that had to rip the Band-Aid off. And I'm like, well, that's fair. Maybe I actually wish I just started a business that was faster path to cash flow. So I think, when you analyze opportunities, now I'm very thankful because my diversification is split between the physical world with my storage company and the digital world with my agency. So it's a really nice balance. And I kind of can take something from this and apply it here, and vice versa. But either way, there's a way to be methodical and smart about it. And really, I think the point is that the faster you can replace or surpass your income at your full-time job, that's going to be the confidence that pushes you to keep going and allows you to kind of stick with it. Because after about a year, I was like, I don't know how much longer I can go. I think we made $10,000 in our first year. It took home 10 grand in my first year. I made like 75 or 80 in my first year out of college at my job. So it was just like pretty dramatic. And granted, I lived locally, like I lived at home and stuff like that, but not everyone has those opportunities. But I could have had a lot more fun at like 24 and 25 and 26, and than I did. For sure.
But tell us about that. Tell us about how you leaned into, I mean, because there's an inherent uncertainty that comes with being an entrepreneur to begin with. It's even more impactful when you think about like the the cost that's lost by hypothetically leaving a job, or hypothetically you lose a certain amount of whatever that you had with Bain, opportunity, capital, etc. And when you're in the middle of it, you're only making $10,000 a year, etc. How did you work through that, and how did you continue to push to where you were able to come out the other side and not only make the storage business a success, but now have the second media company as well, where you're helping other people with the lessons that you learned? Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing, if you're lucky enough to have, if you're in a relationship, so my wife now, Erin, she was huge in just being like, hey, keep going, keep going, keep going, which it feels really good when somebody that maybe you want to spend your life with is pushing you and supporting you. So that gives you confidence to keep going, as opposed to if they were saying like, hey, you need to stop and go do, right? That's going to stress you. That's just like going to cause stress in a whole other area of your life. So that was number one. I was lucky with that. And we've since gotten married, and it's great. So she was great. I think the other thing is, it's almost like ignorance is bliss a little bit. I remember my mom, because my dad was an entrepreneur and had a similar thing, and she said something, and this is how moms are always right. And it's one of those things you're like, no, Mom, I'm not bringing a coat. I'm not going to be cold. And it's very similar to that. And she goes, we were starting the business. She's like, oh, I'm so happy for you. She's like, just so you know, it's going to take 3 years to make money. And I'm like, Mom, you don't know anything. Okay. Like, you're a great nurse, but you don't know anything about business. It's like 3 years to the freaking day
on the dot,
like on the nose. And so I think a little bit ignorance is bliss. Like, had I known, being honest with myself, honest self-assessment, if you would have told me that, like, hey, from day 1 to day 900, I guess, when you think about it that way, you're gonna, really grind for 900 days. I don't know if we're having this conversation right now. Yeah. I think a little bit of that, but it's also just one day at a time. You just gotta keep pushing, right? Like anything, and it's even the same at a job. Yeah, you're going to be getting paid the whole time, but your upside might be capped by, office or company politics or whatever. So there's always a downside to everything. So if you want to, my ultimate goal is to create a life where my income is tied very little to my time. I know for a fact I would not be able to do that at a company. So that was really it for me. It's like, I'd rather, go down swinging, and that's what I did. But in hindsight, when I really think about it, 900 days, maybe over 1,000 if you really do the math, but it's a lot.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to sign up for on the front end. It's almost better that you don't know. Also, shout out Mom, just coming through with the. When you finally were cash flow positive, making some money, was she like, yeah, it's time. Like I told you, it was going to be right around
I told her, I was like, I said, I absolutely pains me to admit this, but you know more than I do. She's like, I know.
I bet she loved that.
Yeah. So but say my parents were super supportive too. So it's just, if you're lucky enough to have family around, it definitely makes it easier to do it.
It's a great point too, because I think this is one of the things that I get passionate about. People often talk about the idea that you have to start a company when you're extremely young, or at least when you're untethered to any location, any people, any, anything that could hold you down, quote unquote. And my experience is very similar to yours in that it was the entire opposite.
Yeah.
Like my wife was actually pushing, no, go ahead, do it. And I would always be like, I don't know, I need to be able to, whatever. And if anything, I think I used her as a crutch more so than what she actually feared. And so I think that system of a family, and now I have 2 kids, and so that adds a whole element. Like
Yeah.
that all adds to the your mentality, your endurance in a lot of ways, your creativity in some ways. So I think a lot of that is overblown. But you're one of my favorite types of marketers because so many of marketers, and myself included, come up as marketers, meaning we didn't operate businesses and then learn how to market because of that. For me, I worked at I worked at a management consulting company and then some agencies. And so my experience was based on consulting other people's businesses, which is fine, but it's not the same as when you're grinding on day 720 and you have to find a way to market in order to get out of the basement or whatever it is. So that all of that context is sort of what bore your company, Brightline Media.
Yeah.
How did that come about? What do you all do there, and kind of tell that story a little bit?
Yeah, so that Brightline came out of on-demand storage, really. So with on-demand storage, we got enrolled. There was this banker who it was his last week on the job at a local bank here in Massachusetts, and they're a relatively business-friendly bank, but still, banking is tough for small businesses until you probably have at least 5, 6 tax returns, and you have a relationship. It's really hard relying on traditional lenders, and so they had some express program, which was a crazy program. It basically, if you gave them, I'm trying to think of what it was. It was like if you literally printed out your QuickBooks and sent it to them, they were like giving you a loan. And this guy's like, "Oh, it's my last week and I'm retiring next week." So I was like, "All right." So he gave us $75,000, which we bootstrapped our business. So it was like we felt like Steve Jobs or something. It was
Flush.
it was yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like we're rich," and so me being the genius, I convinced my partner. I said, we should dump this all in the, PPC and think about it. Like you do this math, we have a 10%, blah, 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 some BS equation I came up with. And I'm like, and we'll turn it into 400,000. We'll pay the bank back and we'll just get a bigger loan and redo it. Obviously 75K down the toilet, a bunch of crappy leads,
Oh
all this stuff.
no.
So yeah. So now the stakes are actually raised a little bit because we guaranteed this loan. So I said, okay, I'm going to learn about SEO. And so we just rolled with it. And I said, I don't really have a choice. And so I never really thought of it before. And so till this day, our PPC budget is zero. It's all organic. We probably get 6 leads a day organically. I'd say like 2 to 3 of them are good. And every now, like we just landed a $350,000 customer through a web form. So
Incredible.
so it's turned into that. So we just till this day, and we recently changed our business a little bit. So we lost some rankings and stuff, which we're working back, but we're focusing only on commercial now. So we're targeting like mostly that stuff. It's just those are the best customers. So what we did is I just started working with our vendors at that company saying like, hey, we're having success with this. And it just kind of snowballed. I met a kid who did email marketing, who's now one of my really good friends, blew it up from there. Then I started tweeting about this stuff, and then that's totally changed it because now with an audience, like it's a lot more inbound and people are coming to me. And so, yeah, I pitch myself a lot of the time just like, hey, I'm not, a standard marketer. I still own equity and run businesses and am cash flow oriented. That's why I tweet a lot about entrepreneurship and operating and running a business too, because that is the other half of marketing. Getting customers is easy if you have an unlimited budget or you can lose
Right.
money. Right? Like it's really no feat. Getting customers in a way that is profitable and sustainable and that can be reinvested into, that's something to be proud of. And so that's really where I try to operate and think about. To me, earned media, which is like SEO, and now I think personal branding for executives and leaders is going to 10x in value over the next 5 years. So that's why I'm doubling down on that.
It's a great point on operating the business. I think it's why so many people, creatives who come into, they maybe start as a freelancer and then decide, okay, I'm going to open up my own shop or my own agency or whatever. It can be a struggle because you're really good at the one thing, but there's so many other things that need to be done past client acquisition, in order to run a successful business. But yeah, so you mentioned thought leadership there at the end, personal branding. You've obviously grown a very significant audience on Twitter. You may be on LinkedIn as well or other places. I'm not sure, but
Just getting started on
any,
LinkedIn.
okay. Any downsides or distractions that you've seen from growing an audience so large, or is it just, helpful
Well,
and cyclical?
yeah, so I think we all like a little dopamine hit every now and
For
then.
sure.
So I think early on, as I was scaling my audience, I was like refreshing my Twitter like this. Now it's now I'm like at the point where I have 75,000 followers roughly. It's like if you can't monetize 75, you can't monetize 750, you can't monetize 7.5 million, right? Like
Mhm.
those are just orders of magnitude past a certain point. And I honestly think it goes way further in the other direction too, from 75,000. So my thought now is right, like I view it as an asset, and so audience is it's like currency. You can trade your audience and your influence for meetings, money, which is like clients or sales, opportunities, uh, DMing people that might not have responded to you without one. And so it doesn't actually make you a smarter or better person. I think you get a little bit smarter from writing and putting in the work and stuff
Sure.
like that. But the real value is just the doors that it can open and can potentially open, right? It's just like being at the poker table with a few more chips, I think. And I think that those will be more important as time passes, because here's the question I always use for people, and this might be helpful to put it in a way that everyone can relate to. So are you a basketball fan?
Huge, unfortunately.
Okay, so you
Sixers
might
fan.
you might debunk this, but maybe not. So
Okay.
it's like, so
Okay.
who owns the Houston Rockets? Who's the owner?
Um, Nelson or Nilman Fertitta or something like that.
All right, so you
Sorry.
maybe know, you're a huge basketball fan. Who owns the Dallas Mavericks?
Cuban.
That's it right there. Like you can ask any person on the street who owns the Dallas Mavericks. It's Mark Cuban. And that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
function of him building an audience. Obviously, insanely successful entrepreneur, but he built an audience. And this another great example is, who's the CEO of Bank of America?
No idea.
No idea. Who's the CEO of JP Morgan? Jamie
Our
Dimon.
guy,
And
Jamie.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, but it's like, why do I even know that? I don't have accounts with, like,
Adam
I
Newman's
don't even,
personal banker.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's a great
it's
point.
so that's important, because we used to associate people with the companies they work for. We're now associating companies with the people who lead them. Elon is the obvious
Mm,
crazy, like, who's the CEO of Ford? It's like, I have no idea, who. And then you look at Elon. I mean, he's like the extreme example. But I think the Mark Cuban one's fun because it's sports related, and
it is.
most people don't know. And it's like those teams are like, what, 2 hours apart or something like that, 3 hours apart, and it's really interesting. So all the smart people that I knew, not famous people like that, but smart people, were building an audience on Twitter. And so I said, I better get started. And so that's the way I look at it. Is I think on a good month, I'll get like 21 or 22 million impressions on my tweets. And
That's
so it's
insane.
just
You
like,
can't buy that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like you think of that. What does that cost on Facebook or something? Right. And it's like,
Right.
costs are going up every day as they keep, as Apple keeps making it harder and harder.
Two questions. Was I right about, is the Rockets guy
I don't know.
Fertitta or
I
something like that?
refuse. I
Oh.
refuse to look it up. So you
I love
you
that.
you have to let me know.
Okay. All right. We'll look it up afterwards. The only reason I would even know is because the Sixers, Daryl Morey, came over from the Rockets, and then we got Harden, so we have like some Rockets ties.
Okay,
So,
all right.
but I don't even know if that's correct. Number two is, yeah. So with content creation specifically on, and specifically Twitter, I mean, I think that is what you've done there is super impressive to someone like me, because I've been on Twitter for whatever, a decade. I mean, I don't even know exactly how long, but not necessarily in a focused way, not necessarily for business purposes for most of that. So how long have you been focusing on that channel? And then what was it, was it one topic or one practice, or when did you start to see the hockey stick growth from wherever you started to 75K? Because that's a sizable audience.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And so I call people that are on Twitter that are not actively trying to go, I call them Twitter lurkers. And you would be surprised at the people who will pop into your DMs as you grow that are Twitter lurkers. And like, they're people, for example, I had one guy who reached out to me from an anon account with 3 followers, the little just gray guy as the photo.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, I'm the CEO of a $100 million mortgage company, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is just my burner account. Like, so I can like stuff that I want." I'm like, well, this is so weird. So I hesitate to do it, but I'm like, okay, here's my email, email me or whatever. And he really was. And so
Wow.
like we were, we'll text, and I'm going to help him with some stuff probably. But, that was pretty eye opening to me. And I probably only had 10 or 12, maybe 15,000 followers at the time. And so that's the type of the audience you're getting there. And so for me, I started really focusing on it in January this year. It was like New Year's resolution type thing. I was like, I really want to do this. You can go back and through my meta thread at the top of my profile, and it has every thread I've done. And so threads is how you grow on Twitter. But there's different there's different types of threads, right? There's like the engagement threads that it's like low quality. So mine are all focused on business, entrepreneurship, different strategies that you can use in business. Like I really like how companies use different psychology strategies to grow their business, price their products, things like that.
Sure.
Or marketing stuff, specifically SEO and earned media. And so that's all I really tweet about in that lane. So I don't really do a lot of like, here's 7 ways to get rich, and it's like, like eat breakfast or something like that. Like I don't that stuff will get retweets and stuff, but I don't, right? The point, I'm not doing it to pump my ego. I'm doing it to build leverage. And so
Right.
I would rather have like audience size at a certain point. I know people with 8,000 followers who make, $1 million a year off Twitter. And I know people with 250,000 who can't make 1,000 a month. So it's really is about the affinity of your audience. So I really like to tweet about what I like and what I care about, and what I'm learning. So my whole strategy is the intersection of what I'm doing and what I'm learning. And that's what I tweet about, like in a nutshell.
Okay. But give us some, where were you in January? You're not at 0 in January, right?
Like 2,000. But it was like friends and family.
Wow.
Kind of stuff.
So this is a significant growth this year. I mean, we're recording this. It's August 2nd.
Yeah.
So
So I've been like roughly 10,000 a month ish.
Wow.
And
I mean,
May and June were slow because I think there was like a little there. Maybe my stuff just sucked then, but I thought there was like the algo was being a little slow, and I was away a little bit, so I was like reposting stuff and not giving it the attention that it needed.
And Twitter was distracted because they were getting acquired, and
true. Yeah, maybe I think they were toning some stuff down they didn't want Elon to see. Maybe that's what I'm rolling.
Yeah,
maybe that content was just garbage, but I refuse
that's
to say that.
I mean, I know you just said the number doesn't matter, but that's super impressive. I mean, especially for someone who is learning on the fly here, like coming into it and tweeting about your experience, tweeting about your business. That's incredible that you've built that. Any people just love tricks, trends, tactics, like anything that you'd advise as someone's trying to start and build an audience of some kind?
Yeah, what I would do is find, like, you can look at my account, and so I think.
What is your account, by the way? We'll link it, of course, below, but just say it for
at Barrett J O'Neill. So Barrett Joneill. And it's a good question. So I think like everything, and kind of back to the beginning of the conversation, there's the way like you did it, and then there's the way you would do it if you knew what you knew now.
Right.
And so I think that's more helpful, because everybody has different levels of, like there might be some people who can grow way faster than I did if they're naturally great writers. Like it took me a while to become a good writer. I think I'm pretty good now, but it took a lot of work. So what I would do is I would find like 10 to 15 big accounts that you really like. I would follow them. I would study all their stuff, how they're doing it. And so the way that you grow follower account is 100% with threads. Like that's how it is. But then I think you need other threads for like to interject some personality, to interject authority, to reinforce. And so like, because to achieve virality, there has to be some level of mass appeal or else it won't go viral, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the conundrum of going viral. It's like you get a lot of followers, but it's hard to build extreme authority with that. So then you reinforce as you get new followers with authority. So I'll do things like I'll tweet something, maybe about a negotiation strategy that I use to close a deal or something. And then I'll reinforce that week if I get a couple thousand new followers, I'll reinforce that with saying like, hey, people are really out here trying to overcomplicate how SEO works. I think if you get strong backlinks, you add 4,000 words of content per month and your website loads fast, then you're ahead of 95% of people. And so that just educates those people like, oh, okay, like, hey, that's super interesting. That sounds like some earned wisdom and maybe some stuff that you wouldn't read. A blog might make that 5,000 words or something to get that point across.
Right.
And so you reinforce it that way. And then, then ultimately maybe you make some offers like, hey, I have a spot open with my agency this month, DM me or whatever it is. And so I think that's kind of how it works. You cast a wide net and then slowly shrink it down to offers. And if you're looking for someone who's probably the best at making offers on Twitter, is a guy named JK Molina. He's the best at offers. Like he probably makes the most of his Twitter account of anybody that I've seen.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's like he has a saying. He says likes ain't cash, which I think is awesome. But he's really, really good. He's way better at making offers than me. Like I'm good to follow if you want to look at what works for growing audience and stuff. But JK has like the tactics for like turning it into cash. So I'm always studying his stuff. Honestly.
His website. I'm just looking. His website is likesaintcash.com.
Is it really?
That's incredible. Yeah. That's a great.
That's a great.
I love that.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. So he's awesome. I would definitely recommend following him. And I would look at big accounts and just see how they're doing it. I would also turn notifications on. If you comment thoughtful stuff on people's, they'll eventually the unwritten rule on Twitter is if you engage enough with someone thoughtfully, eventually they'll start engaging back, even really big accounts. So it's just like you turn the little bell on so you can push notification when they tweet. And then eventually I would form groups of people where you can kind of bounce ideas off of and you just get to know people. I look at it through a networking lens, not through a follower lens. And then like the followers are kind of a byproduct of knowing good people and putting out quality content. And it's like followers will come.
That's awesome. Love that. Love all of the story that you've been able to share with us and the way that you've pushed through, and congrats on everything that you have built to this point. What has you excited moving forward? Any content, any ideas, any trends that you're particularly excited about?
It's a good question. There's a lot I'm excited about in the future. I think overall the thing I'm most excited about is the ability for the individual to build leverage. It feels like it's increasing at a pace that it is hard to keep up with almost, where I don't know if you ever heard that Naval Ravikant podcast where he talks about labor, capital, code, and audience as the 4 types of leverage.
Oh, big time.
If anyone who listening has not listened to that, shut this one off and go listen to that one.
Go listen 100%.
It's way better. But that concept to me, that was really why I started tweeting and getting into it. And so it's really the individual. And what I mean by building leverage is the ability to multiply yourself, multiply your knowledge, multiply the resources that you can provide to other people really in an infinite way. And you can almost completely disassociate your time with income. And you think even back to our parents, and my parents are in their 60s, you think back to their generation, it's like they genuinely did not have these opportunities. The only type of leverage they had was labor and capital, but you needed capital to get labor then. Now we have a global workforce. You have the internet, which is obviously the ultimate leverage. It's pretty much free. You have Twitter, all these different social media apps, which are literally free that you can build insane leverage on. So that's what I'm most excited about. It's like the individual is just way more empowered and I think that's only going to increase. It's like, I think more things will become individual, which is a good thing. Gives ownership to the people.
Yeah. That thread you referenced, there's also a podcast. It's also,
it's awesome.
Essentially become Eric Jorgensen compiled all of Naval's isms into a book.
Oh, really?
Navalmanac.
I gotta get that.
Oh yeah, you gotta check that out. The Navalmanac is excellent. I have it on my bookshelf.
You gotta be smart to get your own almanac.
It is. He didn't obviously write it. Somebody else compiled it, but he's like signed off on it at the end. So it's a pretty good resource. Incredible. But yeah, we'll link all of that below. for anyone who has not gotten to and engage with that golden wisdom. But
Yeah.
Barrett, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for jumping on with us. Thanks for letting us follow along. If anyone else wants to check out what you're doing, check out your businesses, and obviously follow along with your journey, where should they follow?
Yeah, so obviously on Twitter, Barrett J O'Neill. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think my handle's the same there. And I'm actually launching a new site for my agency. It's brightlinesocial.com is our domain. So I should
There we
have
go.
my new site up and running in hopefully a week. You know how that goes, probably two. But it's yeah, I'm happy to connect with anyone. I'm always looking to grow my network and um, yeah, follow along and hopefully can learn something.
All right, man. Appreciate it. We'll catch you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.